We're now going to go into setting the scene for destination and hotel development. So please help me welcome to stage none other than Philip Wooler. A round of applause, please.
Lovely. Thank you, Tammy, and good morning. Okay, we've got a few more statistics, not too many. I'll try and race through them relatively quickly, but it has been a wonderfully interesting time for the hotel industry. This is what we're going to cover. We're going to have a look at some of the global sort of performances, Africa in a little bit more context. Quick look at some of the key markets across Africa, touch on supply, and a little look at pipeline. So I think this is an interesting place to start. And, you know, people often say, can we not move away from the pandemic? And I kind of understand that, but I do think it adds some interesting context to where the hotel industry has moved over the last 3 or 4 years. What we're simply looking at there is the big bubble is the occupancy, the big numbers across the region, and how the occupancies have moved since 2019. I do think it's interesting to see that despite the astonishing increases in average room rates, occupancies haven't really moved that far. In fact, in many cases, they've actually dropped a little bit. One has to consider new supply. There has been a lot of new supply over the last 3 or 4 years. Globally, around about 6 or 7% over 2019. Which is an additional 1.5 million rooms. So have to take that into consideration. The really big story is the average room rate. The large bubble there is the actual average room rate by region, and the lighter blue is a percentage change on 2019. And we can see some phenomenal increases all across the markets. Perhaps mainland China a little bit behind. But in Europe, average room rates have increased by 26%. In North America, 20%. And then when we have a look at Northern Africa and Southern Africa, we can see that average room rate growth has increased by 82% in Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan 36%. Now, we will go into a little bit more detail there. There is more to that story. But the margins, I think margins generally, you know, across the hotel industry have increased phenomenally. I know, you know, that rather irritating city just at the right-hand side of the African continent, Dubai, which everything they do seems to turn to gold. Some of the performances in Dubai and the margins are close to 60% now. So it's really quite remarkable. So looking at if we come a little bit closer to the current time, what we're looking at here is the year-to-date numbers for May 2024 versus 2023. And we can see that things are pretty similar to where they were in 2019. In terms of the growth year on year, very little. Europe, 2% ahead. In Northern Africa, it's actually dropped a tiny bit. But generally speaking, occupancies are pretty static. And average room rates. When we look at the average room rates, and I think it is pretty good news, I'm sure there'll be a number of people in the room that might disagree with me, who are running hotel businesses, but I think it's probably not a bad thing that average room rates generally start to moderate a little bit. In Europe, 3% ahead year on year. In North America, 2%. The actual big bubble is the actual average room rate. So in Northern Africa, $141, we are looking in dollars, and in Sub-Saharan, 146. But there is still quite a big increase in the average room rate on the African continent. When we look at RevPAR, obviously putting the two together, we can see there has been a lot of good progress year on year across the hotel industry. It is in a good spot, even though occupancies haven't really moved very far. But in terms of profitability, and we can look at the African continent again, RevPAR is up 19%, Northern Africa, and Sub-Saharan 23%. So, having a closer look here at the total demand, and total demand obviously is occupied rooms. The 100 line is where it was in 2019. So we can see that demand, generally speaking, is pretty much in line with where it was in 2019. We can see a little bit of a drop-off. I think Northern African data is influencing this in this graph with the Ramadan shift in time. But generally speaking, demand across Africa is pretty much where it was in 2019. When we look at supply, simply hotel rooms coming into the market and demand, we can see on the left-hand side, ideally this is where you would like to be. Addis is a pretty strong market. We can see that demand is outpacing supply in all those markets on the left-hand side. Addis, Kigali, Lusaka, all the way through. That dotted line again is where it was in 2019. So when we look on the right-hand side, we can see supply hasn't really moved in those markets, Seychelles, Mauritius, and further through, including Windhoek. And there has been a little bit of a drop in demand in some of those markets on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, pretty strong markets, supply is increasing, not by a huge amount, but demand is also increasing, and that's obviously where you would like to be. And when we look at the year-on-year change, again, not so dissimilar. On the left-hand side, we can see demand is strong year-on-year as a percentage. Supply is in certain parts coming through, and then obviously on the right-hand side, a little bit of drop in demand. And there is a few reasons for that, which we can go into shortly. Very, very big numbers, but I do think it's interesting. We've got 2019, we're looking at also year on year, and we're looking at the total room supply across the continent. Total of 80 million rooms, 82 million rooms. Room demand is 46.2 million in 2024, and you can compare it with 2019. But the big numbers here, obviously at the bottom, you've got the average room rate growth on 19, you've got the RevPAR growth, and you've got the room revenue. Africa as a continent seems to be heading in the right direction. 89% increase in average room rate. Again, we'll have a closer look at that. And then on a year-on-year basis, things are calming down a little bit, but still encouraging numbers across the whole of the continent. Looking at occupancy, this is year-to-date 2024. These are the actual numbers. You've got a key on the left-hand side. Certain challenges. Year-to-date May 2024, Johannesburg, Gaborone, Lusaka, Kampala, struggling a little bit from an occupancy point of view. And then we can see some of the other markets, particularly in the Indian Ocean. Seychelles, Mauritius have had a very, very strong period since the pandemic. Those are the average sort of occupancies across the continent. Now, when we come to the average room rate, again, this is looking year on year. You can see the actual numbers here. This is in US dollars, so we have to take things into consideration there. But certainly some of the stronger markets, Cape Town, Marrakesh, very, very strong, very good, strong recovery. And the Seychelles and Mauritius, we'll have a closer look at those as well. But some good average room rates across the continent. Now, this is full year for 2023 against 2019. So even though we've got strong room rate growth, there is a few concerns across the continent with some drops in terms of occupancies against 2019. We can see where some of the stronger markets are. But again, if we have a look at the full year, the average room rate compared to 2019, this is where, the story gets quite interesting. Now, some of our clever friends at Westmont Hospitality did point out that there is more to this picture than simply looking at the local currency room rate growth. There has been quite a lot of shifts against the American dollar Many of these markets do sell in American dollars. So one has to take that into consideration. So let me just give us a couple of examples here. So let's see, for example, Cairo. In terms of this slide against the US dollar, it's around about 55%. So with that into consideration, the 164 actually drops to 85%. If we look at Joburg, there's a 16% shift against the US dollar. So really the ADR shift is only 3.9%. And we can go on. A lot of these markets look very, very different when you take into consideration the US dollar. So quickly moving through, again, we're looking at sort of 2019 Index 2. We can see the stronger markets on the left-hand side, Addis, Kigali, through there. And then sort of on the other side, we can go all the way down to Gaborone. So there is a little bit of a issue in terms of occupancy, but the average room rates generally across the continent are pretty strong. All the way through, with the exception of Maputo, average room rates have grown on 2019. And where has that growth come from? I mean, mainly, well, luxury would probably take top spot. You can see here from 2020 all the way through to 2023, you can see how each year has performed. And luxury class in the last couple of years has been the class that has really grown the most. But in upper upscale and upscale as well, we see quite a lot of growth. So let's have a quick look at some of the markets across Africa. Again, we are comparing to 2019. 100 is the benchmark there. And we can generally see that all these markets from Egypt all the way to South Africa, from an average room rate point of view, are growing quite considerably, with Egypt growing the most, but there is some devaluation there. Quick look at Morocco. We have Ramadan to take into consideration there, but we can see sort of the rolling 28 days from an occupancy point of view. Some of the markets in Morocco have done incredibly well, particularly Marrakesh. Some of the average room rates across Marrakesh have been quite staggering over the last couple of years. And then we'll have a quick look at Windhoek. A very, very strong year in 2023. This is the occupancy. Compared to 2019, and we can see how the average room rate growth is breaking through the 2019 barrier, and then also RevPAR. So some good stories coming out of Windhoek as well. And if you can work out this one, you're a better man than me, but effectively a number of different markets in South Africa. Again, we're still looking at the 100 line. A little bit sort of all over the place, but I would say the stronger markets there, certainly Cape Town, Pretoria, but generally speaking, fairly strong across South Africa. Looking at some of the key markets again sort of comparing to 2019, all these markets from an average room rate point of view, with perhaps the exception of Durban, very, very strong average room rate growth, which is, fantastic to see. Just conscious of time a little bit, just going to have a look at some of the resorts. And they have, I think, worldwide, the resorts have done remarkably well over the last 2 or 3 years. I suppose in Mauritius and Seychelles, there is a little bit of a concern as occupancies are beginning to drop. One has to take into consideration the average room rate growth over the last 2 or 3 years. So I would imagine with that growth, you would probably expect some sort of drop in occupancy and demand. And just very quickly looking at the occupancies for the Indian Ocean, very, very comparable to where they were pre-pandemic, very similar trend, but I think this is quite interesting when you look at Mauritius. At the peak time, you'd have to spend $600 on a room in Mauritius. In Seychelles, sort of over $800, and in Maldives, up to $1,000. The big increase really is in Mauritius. You can see the lighter blue, the bars, that's where it was in 2019. So you can see how things have increased. But I would imagine there's going to be a little bit of a slowdown across the Indian Ocean as rates have pushed up so considerably. And then similar sort of picture when you have a look at the RevPAR picture. Very quick look at this. I know Trevor will be talking about supply and pipeline. America, it always fascinates me. I simply do not know where they put these hotels, but they have another 800,000 rooms coming into America, followed by China, and then Saudi. I think we all probably know the Saudi story. Very exciting destination, huge amount of supply coming through. And then which cities? Well, Riyadh is, in terms of global cities, has more pipeline coming in than any other city worldwide, followed by London, and then all the way through. A quick look at the key African cities. Cairo is taking top spot, a 56% increase in current supply, and then we can see Addis, which is a strong market, Lagos, Accra, all the way through. Now, we did have a look at Windhoek. I don't have anything in our data for Windhoek at the moment. Very, very quick look at this, because I know Trevor will touch on this. Top African brands. You've got the brands and you've got the parent company. I think I'm doing Casada a little bit of a disservice, because Casada have been one of the main kind of drivers of hotels on the African continent. But because they don't necessarily fit into a brand or a parent company, they're not on here. But I'm pretty sure Trevor will sort of have a look at that. And then from a pipeline point of view, Hilton will take top spot. I'm not sure why we've got independent there. Marriott, and then parent company on the right-hand side, Marriott, Hilton, Accor. This is the time where the operators roll their eyes and say, no, that's not right. You got all this right. But they give us the data. So anyway, it's up to them to check that. So very, very quickly, time's up. New hotels or new rooms coming into Africa. There's a lot in the pipeline, but we do see quite a lot of delays in the pipeline as well. So not huge numbers coming into Africa, even though there's an awful lot of activity. And I think that is pretty much me. I'm out of time, but some promising data for sure in Africa, some very exciting times. And thank you very much.